$150 million in bribes, just to control the most watched sport on earth. The organization was FIFA. The men taking the money ran world football, and the FBI was already watching them. But the bribes were never the real story. The real story is that football became the perfect place on earth to hide dirty money. And if you work anywhere in compliance, the game just became your problem. Europe is now writing football directly into anti-money laundering law. Before dawn on May the 27th, 2015, Swiss police quietly walked into a five-star hotel in Zurich. They went room to room inside the Bauer Olac, where some of FIFA's most powerful officials were still sleeping. Officials were led out under white bedsheets to hide their faces. At almost the same moment, the FBI raided a confederation office in Miami. The order came from America, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and IRS Criminal Investigation. All of them following the money. The U.S. Attorney General called the corruption rampant, systemic, and deep-rooted. As you will see, she was not exaggerating. This was never a few bad actors. Over 50 people and companies were charged from more than 20 different countries. Bribes for broadcast rights, bribes for tournaments, bribes for World Cup votes. An entire hidden industry running under the sport. And this was not even the first time. A Swiss company had already run the exact same playbook years earlier. The rot was never only at the top. It reached all the way down into the richest clubs on the planet. One London club just paid England's largest ever fine for hidden payments routed through shell companies offshore. Other clubs are now owned by entire nations, accused of inflating their own sponsorship deals to dodge the financial rules. I traced where this money came from, where it went, and why it is now a financial crime problem you cannot afford to ignore. And if you work in anti-money laundering or fraud, I want your answer to one question by the end of this, so stay with me. To understand the corruption, you first have to understand the money. Because football was not always a giant global business, for most of its history, it simply was not worth stealing. That changed in the 1970s. FIFA's leadership made a deliberate choice to run the World Cup like a corporation, selling sponsorships and television rights to the entire planet. The numbers went vertical. World Cup television rights jumped from €30 million in 1986 to more than $2 billion by 2010. A 60-fold rise in one generation. All that money did not spread evenly. It pooled inside a handful of leagues, the so-called Big Five in England, Spain, Germany, Italy, and France, leaving everyone else fighting over the scraps. A 1995 court ruling called Bosman let players move freely once contracts ended. Combined with the television money, it concentrated the best talent inside the richest clubs, widening the gap. Here's the part most people miss. Once those rights were worth billions, access to the few people who control them became priceless. And priceless access is what bribery buys. Think about it from a risk lens. A few officials decided who won contracts worth hundreds of millions, with almost nobody checking their work. That is the textbook setup for bribery and kickback. So the rights themselves became the commodity being traded. Companies competed not on who made the best honest offer, but on who was willing to pay the biggest payment under the table. Let me show you how one of these kickbacks actually moves. A marketing firm wins the rights. It then signs a fake consultancy contract with a shell company. That shell quietly pays the official who awarded the deal. The payments were always dressed up as something legitimate. Consultancy fees, commissions, marketing services, then pushed through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts until the trail looked clean. To a financial crime professional, this should look painfully familiar. It is classic third-party corruption and trade-based laundering, real contracts, real invoices, all wrapped around a completely fake purpose. For decades, regulators treated sport as a special case, somehow separate from serious finance. That blind spot was a gift to anyone wanting to move money quietly through the game. And look at who owns and runs these clubs. Officials with state power, owners linked to governments. In compliance language, these are politically exposed persons, the highest risk customers your systems are built to flag. But here's the good news for investigators. Every single one of these payments had to touch a bank, and the moment money moves through a bank, it leaves a trail you can follow. That is exactly how this case was cracked. Investigators followed the dollars from shell to shell, account to account, until the picture of who paid whom became impossible to deny. And because so many of these payments were cleared in US dollars, they passed through the American banking system. That single fact handed United States prosecutors the power to reach across the world. The Justice Department then sent a clear warning to the banks themselves. Miss these red flags, and you could be next. Suddenly, football was not someone else's problem. It was every compliance team's problem. Now keep one idea in your head for the rest of this. Football launders two things at once. It launders money and it launders reputations. We will see both before we are done. So here is where we are going. The original blueprint, the case that brought it all crashing down. The World Cup votes, the rigged matches, and the billionaire owners who turned clubs into private money machines. For the professionals watching, treat each case as a pattern, not a story. Ask which control would have caught it. The same patterns sit in live transactions right now. And do not forget who pays for all this. Fans who fund the game, honest clubs priced out, and smaller nations whose development money vanished into private pockets. The hardest part to grasp is the culture. Inside these bodies, taking a payment to swing a contract was not seen as a crime. It was simply how business got done. That mindset is what made it systemic. So, let me take you back to where this template was first written. Long before the dawn raids in Zurich, there was a quiet Swiss company that turned bribery into a business model. It was a Swiss sports marketing company called ISL, and in the 1980s it became FIFA's key partner for selling the World Cup to the world. On paper, it looked like a smart, modern business arrangement. ISL sat in the middle, between FIFA and the broadcasters and sponsors, selling exclusive rights to football's biggest tournaments for hundreds of millions of dollars. Whoever controlled that middle seat controlled a fortune. Then in 2001, ISL collapsed into bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is dangerous for the corrupt because suddenly the courts opened the books. When Swiss investigators opened these books, they found the bribes hiding in plain sight. The numbers were staggering. Reporting indicated ISL paid around $100 million in bribes, spread across 175 hidden payments between 1989 and 1999. This was not a slip-up, it was a system, and the names attached to those payments went straight to the top. Swiss court documents identified former FIFA president Joao Havelange and senior executive Ricardo Teixeira as recipients of millions of francs. But watch how the cover-up worked. FIFA settled quietly, keeping the officials' names hidden in exchange for them repaying just part of the money. It took years of court pressure and reporting to force the truth into the open. And the man who would later run FIFA for years, Sepp Blatter, insisted he knew nothing about any of it until ISL had already collapsed. An internal ethics inquiry later cleared him over the affair. Make of that what you will. Here is the detail that should make any compliance professional uneasy. At the time, commercial bribery was not even clearly a crime in Switzerland. The law itself gave them somewhere to hide. The blueprint was now written. Now fast forward to 2015 and those dawn raids in Zurich. The Justice Department unsealed a 47-count indictment charging FIFA officials and marketing executives with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. And read this part carefully because it is the heart of the case. Prosecutors used a law built to take down the mafia. They treated FIFA and its confederations as a single criminal enterprise, the governing body of football charged like a crime family. The first wave alleged more than $150 million in bribes and kickbacks, paid out over a 24-year span, and remarkably that was only the opening figure. It was about to grow much larger. By December, a superseding indictment added 16 more defendants and pushed the alleged bribes hundreds of millions higher. Over time, more than 50 individuals and companies would be charged. The dragnet kept widening. Most of the rot ran through two regional confederations covering North America and South America. Officials there sold the rights to tournaments like the Gold Cup and Copa America to whichever marketer paid them the most under the table. But the case truly turned on one man. Chuck Blazer, a senior American football official, got caught for serious tax crimes. Facing prison, he made a deal. He agreed to become an informant and to secretly wear a wire. So he recorded his own colleagues' conversation after conversation. Those tapes cracked the entire network wide open. The trusted insider quietly became the prosecution's single most powerful weapon against everyone around him. And the pattern those tapes revealed was always the same. Marketing firms won the rights to tournament after tournament, not by offering the best deal, but by paying officials quietly on the side. The contracts simply renewed themselves. The money itself moved exactly as you would expect. Disguised as consultancy fees routed through shell companies, bounced through offshore accounts, and sometimes handed off by trusted bankers and middlemen who knew exactly what they were moving. Fraud analysts. This one is for you. Picture these renewing contracts and matching consultancy invoices crossing your desk. What is the very first red flag you would have flagged? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to compare notes. And the banks were tangled in all of it. Swiss authorities alone received over 80 suspicious activity reports tied to the case. The money had been flowing through real, regulated financial institutions the entire time. There is one detail I find quietly powerful. American prosecutors did not just punish people. They recovered the stolen money and began returning it, recognizing football itself as the victim, with hundreds of millions earmarked to be paid back. But here is a twist that matters for compliance. Not every conviction held. A former TV executive and a marketing company saw their guilty verdicts later overturned after courts raised the legal bar for proving bribery. Winning the case is never the same as keeping it. Still, the deeper lesson for compliance is enormous. A Swiss organization running schemes across dozens of countries was brought down by America simply because the dirty money had passed through US dollars. Jurisdiction follows the currency. FIFA promised sweeping reform. Term limits, integrity checks, shiny new committees. But the core machine, the central control over selling the rights, stayed completely intact, and when the incentive survives, the corruption risk survives with it. Now follow the money to the single biggest prize in the entire sport, the right to host a World Cup. In 2010, 2 of those rights were handed out at once. Russia got 2018, Qatar got 2022, and the allegations have never stopped. Investigative reporters alleged a whole network of slush funds. One influential Qatari official was accused of moving several million pounds to football officials across Africa and the Caribbean, exactly the regions whose votes could decide a hosting decision. Whistleblowers and journalists claimed that several voting members were each offered around $1.5 million to back Qatar's bid. A Swiss broadcaster later pointed to evidence that one official took at least $1 million linked to his vote. Then there was the curious matter of an $8.6 million payment for a friendly match in Doha, made just before the crucial vote. Nobody has proven where all of that money ended up. But the timing raised serious questions. Now I want to be straight with you here. Both host nations firmly deny any wrongdoing, and many of these allegations were never tested or proven in a court of law. That distinction matters, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. FIFA ran its own inquiry, known as the Garcia Report, and concluded there was no proof strong enough to force a re-vote. Critics called that conclusion a whitewash, especially after FIFA had buried the full report for years before reluctantly releasing it. Here is what a risk analyst should take from this, regardless of what was ever proven. Opaque bidding decisions made by a tiny committee, and astronomical stakes. Put those 3 ingredients together, and bribery risk becomes almost a mathematical certainty. But not all football corruption is about marketing rights and votes. Sometimes the target is the result itself. What happens on the pitch? And in 2006, Italy uncovered a case that did exactly that. They called it Calciopoli. Prosecutors got hold of phone intercepts of a powerful Juventus executive, Luciano Moggi. On those calls, he and others discussed and worked to influence which referees would be assigned to the most important matches of the season. And this is what made it so clever. It was not crude cash for goals, it was capturing the referees instead. Control who officiates the big games, and you can quietly tilt an entire league without ever touching a single player. The fallout was brutal. Juventus, one of the most famous clubs in the world, was stripped of 2 league titles and forced down into the second division. Several other clubs were docked points. The sporting punishment, at least, was real. Moggi himself was first sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. But then Italy's highest court ruled the case had simply run out of time. So the sporting ban stood, yet the prison sentence was never actually served. Justice expired on a technicality. For a financial crime professional, reframe match fixing in your own language. It is really market manipulation. The betting market is the venue, the rigged result is the inside information, and the profits get laundered straight through gambling accounts and payment middlemen. And this threat is live right now with the expanded 2026 World Cup. Regulators warn that smaller leagues and tiny in-game bets are soft targets, and the U.S. financial crime network has already put institutions on alert. The laundering risk did not retire. It modernized. Now we reach the part that should worry every compliance officer the most: the owners. Back in 2003, a Russian oligarch named Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea Football Club for around £140 million. It changed the sport forever. Over the next 19 years, Abramovich poured in more than £2 billion, turning Chelsea into a European powerhouse. But for an investigator, every spending spree begs one simple question. Where exactly did all of that money come from? Investigations found the club was funded through a web of offshore companies. At least £1.4 billion was lent to Chelsea interest-free from an entity based in Jersey. Interest-free billions are not how ordinary businesses borrow money. Then came the leaks. A major journalism project called Cyprus Confidential exposed tens of millions of pounds in undisclosed payments routed through Abramovich-linked offshore vehicles, payments that had been left out of the club's official accounts entirely. And it all came to a head in March 2026. The Premier League handed Chelsea its largest fine ever, around $14 million, for off-the-books payments that added up to £47.5 million across 7 years. The league's 28-page report laid it out in detail. 36 undisclosed payments going to 12 different people and companies, with most of the money routed through intermediaries based in the British Virgin Islands. That is textbook layering. Those hidden payments helped secure star players and reward key backroom figures, all while staying invisible to the league's financial reporting rules. In plain terms, this was a shadow payroll deliberately kept off the books to gain an edge on the pitch. And here is the twist that saved them from the harshest punishment. The breaches only surfaced because the new owners found them during due diligence after buying the club, and then reported the club to the authorities themselves. Self-reporting is what spared Chelsea a points deduction, and the Premier League was not the only body involved. European football's governing body had already fined the club years earlier over related transactions, and a separate investigation into agent rules with dozens of charges is reportedly still hanging over them. I have put the full Chelsea breakdown, with the league's report and the offshore structure mapped out, step by step, over on davincidiligence.com. And if you would rather take this investigation with you, the whole thing is on our Spotify podcast, Da Vinci Diligence. Links are in the description below. And the story still is not over. Authorities in Jersey are now examining whether the billions of pounds raised from Chelsea's forced sale could count as the proceeds of crime, given questions over how Abramovich made his original fortune. He denies any illegality. Reporting also suggested that while he owned Chelsea, Abramovich quietly bankrolled a Dutch club called Vitesse. For a regulator, that raises one of the biggest red flags of all. Hidden control across two different clubs that could meet in the same competition. And Chelsea is not alone. Other clubs have taken enormous sums from figures later hit by sanctions. One English club is reported to have received more than £400 million from entities tied to another oligarch over just a few years. Then there is the newest and most powerful model of all. Not billionaires, but entire nations buying clubs. Abu Dhabi took control of Manchester City in 2008. Qatar took Paris Saint-Germain in 2011, and both poured in fortunes no ordinary owner could match. Now, football has spending rules designed to stop clubs losing more than they earn, but leaked documents suggested some sponsorship deals from state-linked companies were inflated to make the books look balanced. Analysts have a name for that trick: financial doping. In 2020, European football's governing body banned Manchester City from the Champions League over alleged serious financial violations. But the Court of Arbitration for Sport overturned that ban, partly because much of the case had run out of time, and partly on insufficient proof. Much of the suspicion traced back to the Football Leaks documents, which hinted that both clubs may have used non-market sponsorships and backdoor owner funding to appear compliant with the rule. Both clubs deny any wrongdoing and insist they follow the regulations. Spain's top league, La Liga, has filed complaints arguing exactly this: that unlimited state money and non-market sponsorships distort the entire competition. When one club can absorb any loss because a government stands behind it, the level playing field quietly stops being level. And there is a payoff here that has nothing to do with trophies. Human rights groups call it sports washing, using the glamour and success of football to polish the global image of regimes criticized for their human rights record. The club becomes a public relations machine. And this connects straight back to the idea I asked you to hold. This is influence laundering. The very same playbook as money laundering, except the thing being cleaned is a reputation. And the owners doing it are politically exposed persons. Your systems are supposed to be screening. So here is where every thread we have pulled finally lands. Regulators no longer treat football as some special, untouchable case. They now treat it as a genuinely high-risk sector, in the same category as real estate, casinos, and luxury goods. And the law has caught up. Since 2024, European rules have pulled professional football clubs directly into the anti-money laundering framework. A powerful new authority is being built to supervise them, with full compliance required before the end of the decade. In practice, that means clubs will soon have to do what banks already do: identify their real, ultimate owners, run proper customer due diligence, and file suspicious activity reports. Football clubs are being treated, for the first time, almost like financial institutions. Even the global standard setter for fighting financial crime, the Financial Action Task Force, has published a dedicated report on laundering through the football sector. When that body writes about your industry, it is no longer a fringe concern. It is mainstream. And now the answer to the question I opened with. The bribes themselves were never the real story. The real story is that football quietly became the perfect laundromat: opaque ownership, enormous cross-border flows, and oversight that was weak for decades. Think about what all flows into this one game: oligarch wealth, state capital from entire nations, and tens of billions in global broadcast money. That convergence, all landing in a sector with weak controls, is exactly what makes football such fertile ground for corruption. The fixes are not a mystery if the will is there. Public registers of who really owns every club, real scrutiny of related party sponsorship deals, and fit and proper tests with genuine source of funds checks before anyone is allowed to buy a team. Transparency is the whole game. So if you screen transactions, onboard new clients, or write the policies, understand this: football has just entered your risk universe for good. The next big dirty money case you investigate might not wear a suit, it might wear a club badge. If this changed how you see the beautiful game, subscribe. I release a new financial crime investigation every week, breaking down how the money moves, and share it with someone in compliance or finance who needs to see it. Next week, I am tracing how a single shell company in the British Virgin Islands moved dirty money through 3 different industries before anyone looked. Subscribe so you do not miss where that trail leads. I will see you in the next investigation.